what are the three factors of authentication?
What you have, what you are, and what you know.
Okay, can you give an example for each?
So what you are is basically like biometrics, eye scan or fingerprint or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What you have is probably like a key or a password, and what you are, I'm not sure.
So what you know is basically, you know, something like a password or passphrase, whatever it is, you know it. What you have is, I have a certificate, I have a key, I have a card. See, in some organizations, they have employees have to carry a card. Okay, so basically you swipe the card and get in. Okay, you have something, or you might have a key with you. So that's what you have. What you know is, as I told you, it is, I know a password, I know a passphrase. Okay, what you are, you have to prove you are a human. So basically, you have to give your fingerprint, and it has to identify you uniquely. So every individual fingerprint and retina scan will be totally different. That's why we use those two things. So in many organizations where security is very important or utmost priority, there you will go for retina scanning. And in normal scenarios, we will use fingerprint. Generally, retina scan, the scanners are very costly. Okay. So that's about the factors of authentication. So based on the factors of authentication, can you classify authentication, students, based on the factor? Hello.
Yes, sir. Like how many factors we consider for authentication, like multi-factor authentication or just single factor?
Yeah, yeah. Based on the factors, we can classify the authentication as multi-factor authentication and single-factor authentication. Okay. So in some cases, say for example, you want to go and access your locker in a bank. So in some banks, you will have multi-factor authentication. That means you need to give your signature, and you need to have a key with you, and you need to have an alternate key also for that. So basically, multiple authentication factors are required there. In some cases, it is only single factor authentication. Say for example, switching on your laptop, you will give only a password which is what you know exactly. It is a single factor authentication. To access the system of your organization, you have to first enter into the system. To we have to enter into the organization. That is one factor. And again, once you enter into the organization, to switch on your system, you need to give the password again. As a whole, if you take, it is multi-factor. So that's how the multi-factor and single factor authentication works. Apart from that, apart from the classification with respect to the factors, authentication is again classified into one way and two-way authentication. What do you mean by that? Can anyone tell me?
So in one way, basically only one party needs to be authenticated. The other, like the other party in the communication, needn't to be. In two-way or bi-directional, both the parties should be authenticated to each other. It's like a
Yeah.
mutual authentication.
Yes. So one way is basically unidirectional. That means I need to authenticate myself to a server. That's all. And server is not going to authenticate itself to me. Is that clear? That is one way authentication, or you can also call it as unidirectional. The other is two-way authentication, where both server and client needs to authenticate themselves to each other. So we call it as bidirectional, or you can also call it as mutual authentication. It's mutually those two are authenticating themselves. Okay, so these are the some basic things which you need to know about authentication. So apart from that, um, why do we need to go for authentication, students? Why authentication is important? It's a very simple question.
To prove the identity, sir.
To prove the identity. So basically, for to maintain the what I can say, guarantee that I am communicating to you, because when whatever the communication that you do over internet, you physically don't see the other person, right? So when you don't physically see the other person, there should be some way or some sort of mechanism to make sure you are connecting to the right person. For that, you need to go for authentication. That's the major requirement of authentication. Now let us move towards the protocols of authentication. There are two major approaches for authentication. Can anyone tell me what are the two major approaches?
The password thing and the certificate thing.
Can you elaborate, Priyadarsan?
So one is knowing what you that those three factors are what you have, what you are, and what you know.
No, no, no,
And the,
no, no, no. You cannot categorize in that way.
okay, the
There are two
general
approaches
password
basically.
thing, the first one is,
Tell me.
and using a third party like that you're saying, sir.
Yeah. See, the broad category is approach one, password based authentication, approach two, cryptography based authentication. Okay. These are the two broad categories. Under password based authentication, there are two ways. What are they?
Fixed password and one-time password.
Okay. What are the issues with fixed password? What type of attacks this fixed password is vulnerable to?
Sir, basically fixed password will be stored somewhere, like in the main server or somewhere. So that encryption, decryption, and all, it will be happening somewhere else. And also, it can be stored either as plain text or ciphertext. So if it is stored as plain text, then eavesdropping, sniffing, password kissing, and unauthorized access to password file, all those issues can occur.
Okay, eavesdropping is not a kind of attack where which happens to the stored data. Okay, eavesdropping is somewhere where if it is not a one-time password, if it is a fixed password, what you will do, you will send the password from your system to the other client to the server. So when you send that password, when it is in the medium, somebody looks into your data. That is eavesdropping. Okay, eavesdropping may
Yes.
happen to OTP also, one-time password also, but the time limitation is there for OTP, whereas fixed password time limitation is more. Okay, so if eavesdropping attack is made, then the attacker can gain access to your channel, looks at your password, and attacker can use your password. That will take some time. But if you are using OTP, the time limit, since the time limit is less, it is quite difficult for the attacker to go ahead with the eavesdropping attack. Okay, so apart from eavesdropping, as you said, sniffing, password guessing, unauthorized access to the password file, all these are with related to passwords which you have stored. Okay, how do you overcome this issue with the fixed passwords? Any guess? The first thing is you should not store the password as it is. So the
Hashing.
first, yes. The two methods to overcome this problem is the fixed password hashing and fixed password salting. Okay, fixed password hashing is where the hash of the password is stored, is that in the verifier side. Whereas in fixed password salting, a random value or random string we basically call this as salt, and that will be concatenated with the actual password, and then hash of that is taken and that will be stored in the verifier side. And that random value may be anything. Say for example, when I am going to create a new account in Gmail, I have to fill a form, right? In that form I will give my username, password, my first name, second name, like that. It asks for multiple data. Any one of the field will be considered as that salt, and that will be concatenated with a password, and then hash value of that will be stored in the verifier site. Am I clear, students?
Yes,
So
sir.
that, yeah, that is basically the methods to overcome the problem with fixed password. And the other one is one-time password. We know one-time password is more efficient compared to fixed passwords. It is quite difficult to make any kind of an attack with one-time password. So that's about the first approach, password based authentication. Second approach is cryptography based authentication, where in cryptography based authentication you have three methods which we discussed. Authentication based on symmetry key without a trusted third party. That means you have a claimant A which has to verify to another claimant B, to a verifier B basically. So what claimant, initially happens, A will send its ID to the verifier or the other party B in clear text. So for that, B will send a response with a timestamp and a nonce in clear text. And then see, I am sending something to another person. The other person, after receiving my ID, he will send a timestamp and a nonce to me back. And then what I do, I will have the same timestamp, nonce, ID of the other person, and information what I have to send. I will encrypt all these things using a key. Is that clear? It's a session key basically, and I will share that session key also to the other party. So basically, this is authentication based on symmetric key without a trusted third party. Symmetric key means for encrypting and decrypting, you will use the same key. Then the other one is next one, authentication based on symmetric key with a trusted third party. So that is based on the Needham-Schroeder symmetric key authentication algorithm. That means you need to have a trusted third party to get the key. Okay, A has to get the key from the third party, B also has to get the key from the third party. I have given you all the steps there. Please go through that. That is based on the Needham-Schroeder symmetric key authentication. And the last one is authentication based on public keys. So what is public and private key pair? That is basically asymmetric keys. What we saw now is symmetric keys. That means for encryption and decryption, you will use the same key. The public key encryption means it is asymmetric keys. That means every user will have a key pair, public and private key pair. Public key will be known to everyone. I mean, even if it is not known, you will be easily, like, you can easily get to know the public key of someone. But private key is only for that particular user. Okay. So if you encrypt something using the public key, the same key pair, the private key of that public key has to be used to decrypt it. Or if you encrypt using a private key, then the same key pair, the public key has to be used to decrypt it. Is that clear? So from where you will get this? Again, based on the third party, that is Needham-Schroeder public key authentication protocol. We have Needham-Schroeder symmetric key authentication protocol also, and public key authentication also. Okay, so these are the second approach. These are the things which comes under the second approach, that is cryptography based authentication. Now, before moving into the applications of authentication, that is Kerberos, multi-Kerberos, what is basically digital signatures are? Can anyone tell me? We have discussed a lot about digital signatures, right? What are they, students?
Sir, it's basically a way for authentication where we sign the hash code, like sign the hash code of a message using the private key of the sender. So when the receiver receives this, so basically he can decrypt it using the public key of the sender. So sender's identity is verified. Something like that.
Okay, you're right. So basically, you have some data. Okay, so you take the hash of it. You take the hash code of the data, then that hash code will be encrypted using the sender's private key. Why? Because that private key of the sender is known to only that person. Is that clear? That's why sender is encrypting the data using the sender's private key, and it is sent to the destination. Here, one thing you have to keep in mind, when you are going for authentication, only if you are going for authentication, then here confidentiality is not proved, because you have encrypted the data using your private key. That means anybody can decrypt it, because your public key is public. Anybody can know your public key. Is that clear? That's why if you encrypt anything using the private key, it is very sure for anybody who is decrypting it that you are only have generated that message and you have only have sent the message, but anybody can decrypt it. Is that clear? That is why it is called as digital signature. It's a fact that somebody for someone that this is from this particular person only. Is that clear? So that is digital signatures, and generally digital signatures are used for authentication purpose. Is it clear? Now, so the applications of Kerberos, which type of an application that we discussed, students, in application of Kerberos? I think let me share that. What applications that we discussed?
So basically, authenticating a user to a service that is given by a server.
Yeah, but we specifically know a service, right? What authentication service, right? What it is? Kerberos, no? Kerberos is what? Kerberos is an authentication service, right?
Yes.
It's an authentication service. We have specific Kerberos servers in different areas. Is that clear? So let us see this. It's an important topic. So you have a client, and client want to communicate with the actual server, and before gaining access to the server, client has to authenticate itself. So for that, there is a system called, or there is a server called, or there is a mechanism called Kerberos, which is basically a service for authentication. And this Kerberos has two different servers inside it. One is authentication server and ticket granting server. What happens initially, a client will log into a workstation, and then what happens basically, client has to send a request to this authentication servers first, which is there in the Kerberos. What it is requesting? It is requesting to gain a ticket to reach ticket granting service. Is that clear? Because for this client to reach the server, it needs a ticket called service granting ticket. Is that clear? SDG, SGT, service granting ticket is required for the client. Who will give SGT? This ticket granting server will give the SDG. SGT. Is that clear? So to reach the ticket granting server, there is no direct route. You have to access authentication server and ask for a ticket to reach the ticket granting server. Is that clear? Why? To get the service granting ticket. So now the second step is the client will request the authentication server for a ticket granting ticket, and for that authentication server will give a ticket granting ticket to reach ticket granting server. So this client will inform ticket granting server that, okay, I am so and so, I need a service from that particular server, and hence give me a ticket, service granting ticket. Is that clear? That's why you can see in the third step, authentication with TGS to obtain SGT. Is it clear? And every time when you contact a server like authentication server or TGS or actual server, you have to authenticate yourself. Is that clear, students? So now for that, this ticket granting server will see the authentication credentials, and if everything is fine, this Kerberos ticket granting server will give a service granting ticket. That means using the service granting ticket, this client can reach the actual server. Is that clear? So once the service granting ticket is acquired by the client, client can directly communicate to the server. This is the Kerberos authentication mechanism, and this is confined to a particular realm. That means in a particular realm, a realm is an environment where you have only one Kerberos server and you can have multiple clients and multiple service servers. Is that clear? For all those service servers and for the clients to access any kind of service servers, there will be only one Kerberos authentication server. Now, suppose if your server is in another realm, that means another environment where it is attached to a other Kerberos server. So here all the service servers are attached to this Kerberos server, all the clients are attached to this Kerberos server. Is that clear? Whereas similarly, there might be another realm where there will be one Kerberos system and all the clients and service servers will be attached to that particular Kerberos. So for that case, how do you communicate? If you want, if this client wants the service from a service server which is attached to another Kerberos server, in that case, basically, yeah, we call it as inter-realm authentication. That means you are communicating from one realm to another realm. Inter-realm. If you are connecting if you are communicating in a single realm, it is intra-realm. Now it is inter-realm authentication. So now client will send a request to its own Kerberos server requesting for ticket granting ticket for local TGS. Is that clear? For local TGS. Then it requests for TGT. Is that clear? For remote TGS. So first it has to reach the authentication server, ask the ticket to reach the ticket granting server, and then once it reaches the ticket granting server, it is asking for the ticket granting ticket to reach the other Kerberos realms ticket granting server. Why? Because it has to get the service granting ticket from the other Kerberos realm. Is that clear? That's why it is asking its own Kerberos server to give the ticket to reach the other Kerberos server TGS, ticket granting server. Once this Kerberos in realm A provides the ticket granting ticket of the remote TGS, it will contact the remote TGS and ask for the service granting ticket of that remote server. Then this Kerberos B will give that service granting ticket, and with that service granting ticket, this client A can reach the server. Is that clear? The service server and get the services what it requests. Is that clear, students? That's about multi-Kerberos. And these Kerberos, different Kerberos servers are interconnected. They will be keep on communicating themselves. That's why this Kerberos A know the ticket of Kerberos B. Is it clear, students? Am I clear? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The next thing is directory services. What do you mean by directory services, students? Who are directory services actually?
It is a repository for all the public key certificates.
Yes. Basically, directory services are a place or a database or a repository where you store all the public key certificates of the users. So, one thing you have to keep in mind is directory services only provide service to store the certificates. They don't generate the certificates. Service generation, this certificate generation is done by certification authority. There is something called a certification authority. If you are a new user, request for the certification authority to generate a key for you and give it to you, and that certification authority, after generating the key, it will give that certificate to you, and also that will be stored in the directory services. If in case certification authority is not storing the certificates in the directory services, you yourself can store your certificates in the directory services. Okay, so if I want to communicate to you, I don't know your public address, public key. So what I will do, I will go to the directory services, look for your public key in your certificate, and using that I will send you something. Okay, so that's about the difference between directory services and certification authorities. So keep in mind, certification authorities only generate the certificates. Directory services provides a space to store that certificates. It doesn't take care of generating the certificates. Keep this in mind. And did I give you the yeah, X.dot 509 certificate. So you can see the version, certificate number, certificate serial number, algorithms, issuer name. Issuer name means who is the certification authority who has issued it, and period of validity. Subject name. Subject name will basically have the user name. Is that clear? Name of the user for whom this certificate is issued. Is that clear? That will carry, subject name will carry that information. And then you will have algorithms for parameters and keys. Yeah, issuer unique identifier. That means this will be a unique identification of the certification authority who has issued it. Subject unique identifier. So basically it's an optional string, students. So it's basically information about the user itself. So issuer unique identifier means it is basically with respect to the certification authority. Is that clear? Extensions and all these are again optional. So these are the some fields that will be available in the X.dot 509 certificate format, and there will be a signature in it. Is that clear? There will be a signature, and that signature is done by the certification authority only. Is that clear? Not from the user. That is the signature of the certification authority. So that's about the directory. And there is one more thing. If these there are many ways or many reasons for a directory service to place a certificate in a revocation list. See, a directory service will have a revocation list with it, and there are some reasons why these certificates will be placed by the directory services in the revocation list. They are, maybe the secret key is assumed to be compromised. That means AA's public key is there with a directory service. With, I mean, that the certificate will be there, the key will be, public key will be there in the certificate, and the directory service will know it. If the same AS private key is compromised, and if that is known to the directory service, then it will place that particular certificate in the revocation list. And if somebody looking for a certificate, looking for the certificate of A, and if it is there in the revocation list, the other person will get to know that it's there might be some issue. There might be some issue, like the private key might be compromised. And the second thing is, user is no longer certified by the certification authority. That means it is not that the certificate is expired, but the certificate what issued by the certification authority is no longer valid. Is that clear? For that particular user. And then for some, it may be for any reason, and the CA's certificate is assumed to be compromised. That means instead of a certification authority, someone else who might have been generated this and portrayed it as a certification authority. So all these are some of the reasons for which a particular certificate will be placed in the revocation list. Is that clear? So these are the things which we discussed in the first chapter. There are some more things about hashing and other things that we will discuss that in the next class. Okay, so we'll stop here for the day, students. Enjoy your weekend. You have any questions, you can ask, or else you